So the other day, I was sitting down at my desk at home and working on an important proposal. It was due the next day. It's for a fairly sizable sort of project for my business, for sales training. And I could hear in the background squabbling kids. Two of them, the eldest 9 years old, the second one 6 years old, and they were at each other. So those are my two eldest children. And I could feel someone tugging at my pants, and I looked down, and it was my third child, who was only just a little bit over 1 year old. Is this work-life balance as we know it? That's the question we're going to be addressing today. I'm going to share with you 3 ideas that will help you to create a work-life balance for yourself. And I'm hoping that sharing my personal stories with you will help to encourage you to know that, yes, it is possible, albeit a little bit frustrating at times when you're trying to get work done. But no, my children are wonderful. I love them very much. And every time I'm tempted to feel frustrated that I can't work on something in the business, I remind myself that we're living in one of the greatest times in all of history, that we have a concept of work-life balance. I have a hard time imagining what it would be like living like a peasant, several hundred years ago under the dictatorship of some monarch. But in this day and age, we have the luxury of saying, I'm going to take a day off today and spend it with my kids. Or I'm going to take a mental health day. That was a popular concept back in one of my previous careers in nursing. And, it's kind of funny though, because a lot of us struggle with this idea. Every time you say, oh, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a while. Oh, how have you been? What's the most common response you'll hear? I've been busy, right? Busy. In this day and age, our culture encourages this idea of being busy all the time. And that's kind of the way that we all do things. We feel that that's the way that we should be living our lives. But is it the right way to go? And that's an interesting question that I'd like to pose to you. Before I start talking about my stuff, I'd like to hear from you. Is work-life balance possible? Who would like to show of hands? Yes, you believe it's possible? Raise your hand. There's a few skeptics. Okay, so for those of you who, this is going to be a little bit interactive, by the way. So for those of you who feel that it's not really possible, would you like to volunteer your explanation?
I think there's periods where it's not possible and there's periods where it's not possible. So
yes.
For me, on a daily basis, it's not always possible. When I look at like a year-long sort of picture, I see periods where I can, sort of have more of a balance. Where there's periods where it's just it's not possible.
Yeah. So it can be seasonal and
seasonal, yearly.
Yep, absolutely. And do you mind sharing a little bit about your circumstance? So do you own your own business, or are you working for someone?
So academic, university lecturing. So we have there's demands in terms of teaching, but also research, writing, and all those things. And those things can be there's periods where it's just frenetic and the nature of the working away.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'd like to share with you today will help, irrespective of your current circumstances, even if you have seasonal, peak periods where things are just absolutely crazy. You not enough hours in the day. But what I want to share with you will help with that. But before I do, I'd like to share a story with you, because stories are really great for remembering stuff. We have an easier time remembering them than we do just words. So this is a story that was originally shared by Stephen Covey. So it's a show of hands, anyone who's read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So for the rest of you who haven't, highly recommended. Excellent book, great principles that you can apply in life. So this story will be familiar for those of you who have read the book. The story goes that, let's just put you in the story. So imagine yourself walking in the forest. You can hear the birds chirping and the leaves rustling in the wind. And you can also hear the chop, chop, chopping of a tree. So there's a woodsman who's chopping down the tree. And as you approach closer to this man, you see that he's getting quite frustrated and flustered. He's red in the face. He's banging away at that tree with his axe. Then you make an observation. You notice that, wait a minute, there's something wrong with that axe. It's looking a little bit blunt. So then you offer some friendly advice to the woodsman, and you say, hey, why don't you take some time to stop and sharpen the axe? And to that he responds, there's no time to sharpen the axe. I got to get this tree down as soon as possible. So this story is a great illustration for the fact that work-life balance is almost not an option. We actually have to do it in order to be effective at the work that we are doing. So if your ultimate objective is to make a certain amount of money or to get that next promotion, you would be best served if you were somehow able to create this balance for yourself. So Steve Covey calls it sharpening the saw. Take some time out every day to sharpen the saw. Refresh yourself, improve your skills, and you'll find that you'll be much more effective when you go and actually try to execute on your work. Interestingly, New Zealand and Sweden have been trialing for the last couple of years this idea of work-life balance and seeing if it will increase people's productivity. What they did was they said you can work 6 hours in a day for the same amount of pay. So they're running this experiment in some of the businesses. And so nurses was one of the professions that got to try this out. Lucky nurses, and it was all government funded. New Zealand is undergoing a similar sort of trial. Now, unfortunately, the results from these experiments have not been conclusive yet. So there's still a lot of research that needs to be done as to whether this is fully effective. But the very fact that they're trying, as an entire nation, that they're trying this to see if it brings out more productivity in its people is very, very interesting. Some of the preliminary results is that people are taking less sick leave. Surprise, surprise. If you don't stress yourself out, you take less sick leave, you get to work more, right? When people are on the job, or think about it for yourself, when you are on the job, do you tend to work better if you're fully rested and you're happy, or when you're run off the mill and you're stressed? What tends to happen when you're stressed out and you're feeling very tired is that you tend to procrastinate more in your work. You tend to make more mistakes. And that's not very productive at all. So there's a very, very compelling case that even if you want to become more efficient, taking some time away from work rather than working those 12 hours or 13 hours straight, there's a compelling case that you should take some of those hours to rest and recuperate. And your family would probably thank you for it as well. Everybody here is a father, I'm presuming. It's the Fathers Association, and we've got one mother, I presume, to join us. So you can certainly apply these principles as well. Now, over to the actual 3 points that I'd like to share with you to help you to create this so-called mythical work-life balance. And to do that, I'm going to tell you another story, except this one's going to be a really weird one. And the reason that it's weird is because weird things are easier to remember. So this is a memory lesson as well, okay? So whenever you need to memorize something, use weird stories that are funny if possible to try to remember it better. Okay, so here's the scenario. You've come home and you're going to enter into the room where your bookshelf is. I'm presuming everyone has a bookshelf. And okay, so imagine yourself entering the room in your house that contains the bookshelf. Except you notice before you enter, you look on the floor and you see some dust, and you kind of scoop the dust up and notice that, hey, wait a minute, this is not regular dust. This is too colorful to be dust. It's as you scrape it off your hands, it kind of dissipates and disappears altogether. It's almost as if by magic. Then you notice that someone has been tampering with your bookshelf. They've put items there that you didn't notice or that you didn't have before. The first one is a dictionary. Now, this dictionary is not just any dictionary, it's a magical one. You pick it up and suddenly it talks to you. It says, hello, oh, it gives you a bit of a fright. And the reason that I'm telling you about this magical dictionary is because the first principle for work-life balance is to define what it is. What does success mean to you? What does work-life balance mean to you? You have to be clear about what that is in the first place before you can go about progressing towards it or achieving it. So I'd like to open it up to you to give your responses. What does work-life balance mean to you? Or what does success mean to you?
Success for me is the time and the money to do the things that I want to do, when I want to do them, and who I want to do them with.
Ah, so that's almost as if it's freedom, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the greatest enablers of freedom is having the money for it, isn't it?
Yeah. And the time.
And time, yes. One of the key problems with most people when they're frustrated with their lives is that they don't even know, they haven't even sat down to think, how do I define balance? How do I even define success? Is success all about the money? Yes? No?
I think you're very successful if you're actually quite content with where
Aha.
you are in life.
Contentment. Absolutely right. Contentment
That
is...
often comes with a certain amount of financial.
Absolutely. There was a really great quote from another sales trainer, Zig Ziglar. He said this. He said, money isn't everything, but it ranks right up there with oxygen. So it's definitely something that we all need. So there has to be a certain amount of this in order to be happy, in order to have the freedom, in order to free up the time. Time equals money, as the saying goes. But it's very important for you to decide for yourself what success would be. One of the great exercises that you can try out, once again, this is referring back to Steve Covey's book, is to do what's known as the obituary exercise. So what you need to do in this exercise is to imagine yourself walking into a church or place of worship, and there seems to be a funeral going on. And as you progress down the aisle between the rows, you approach the casket and you see that it's yourself in there. Shock horror. It's a bit morbid, but then you get to listen to the obituaries of what everyone is saying about you. So the whole point of this exercise is to figure out what is important to you. What are the things that you would like your friends and your family to say about you if you were gone one day? When we're all going to go one day, so what would you like them to say when we go? Are they going to say that you were a hard worker? Or would you like them to say that you were a loving father? What kinds of things would you like them to say? That's one way that can help us to understand what is really important to us. So once you have defined what you want, then you can start progressing towards it. So what was the first object that we picked up from the bookshelf? From the bookshelf? So, yep, the dictionary, the magical one, right? And the magical dictionary could talk. And we actually get to ask the dictionary, what does success mean? And they'll say, well, according to my pages, this is what success means. But what does it mean to you? So you have a conversation with the dictionary. I told you it was going to be strange. The second object that you pick up from the bookshelf is a rolled up blue piece of paper. You roll it out. It turns out to be a blueprint. Any engineers in the room? Yeah, a few. Okay, so do you still use blueprints or is it all AutoCAD nowadays? All AutoCAD. Blueprints is a bit old school, I think, probably my dad's days. And so these blueprints, once again, it's got a bit of that magical dust on it, right? So it's not just any ordinary blueprints. This one has moving images on it. So it's not just a static blueprint of how to design something, how to make something. This is the design of your life, of your work-life balance. So that's the second D for today, design. Everything that's in your life right now is created by design. Whether you were intentional about the design or not is a different story. How many of us actually take the time to sit down and to think, what would I like my life to be like? More often than not, we're on the social media. We're on the computer, answering emails, we're watching TV, we have distractions galore. As a result, we very seldom spend the time to stop and to think. We are constantly thinking, but we don't ever stop to think. Once you have defined what it is that you really want, then you have to design it into your life. If your priority is to spend more time with your family and your friends, then you have to design that into your life. One of the great questions that you can ask yourself is, what would be required, or what would I need to chop and change here and there in order to enjoy this kind of lifestyle that I want? So, my definition of success does include a big element of money. Money is very important. I'm in sales training. I got to talk about money. I got to encourage people to sell more, to make more money, and there's a lot of it's something that's very important. But I have to balance that with my 3 young kids and helping my wife out to look after them. I have to constantly remind myself that my kids are at this age right now that they are the most impressionable. If I spend and invest in them now, the dividends are going to pay for their entire lives, and therefore the entire of my life. It's a different kind of investment. It's not the financial one. It's a social investment. One of the things that I'm dreading is when my kids get to the teenage years, because I remember what it was like being a teenager. Does anyone have teenagers here? It's scary. I'm very, very terrified of the teenage years because the hormones are raging. They don't think straight. They think they know everything. They think they're invincible. I'm dreading those times. But I know that if I spend a certain amount of time with them now, that they'll be kind of less likely to be rebellious. Maybe they still will be, I don't know. But hopefully I will have invested enough social capital with my kids that they'll still listen to me when they are in their teenage years. So that's my definition of success and spending time with them. So when it came to the design aspect, one of the things that I've designed into my life is that I'm going to be the one to do the school drop-offs and the pickups. So I'm seeing a lot of other mums. Occasionally I might see a couple of dads at the school drop-offs and the pickups, but that's by design. I chose this pathway. Mind you, it was a difficult one. When I went into business for myself 6 years ago, it was a huge risk. But this was what I was designing, this was what I was working towards. It was a huge risk because essentially for 6 months or more, we were going to go without any income. I quit my sales job, and which was stable and guaranteed, and went out on this venture, designing this into my life. Sometimes, if what you really want, if what you've defined as success is important enough for you, then you have to make sacrifices. You have to design those things out of your life in order to fit those other things in. I told you it's possible. I didn't say it was going to come easy. I didn't say it was going to be without sacrifice. Work-life balance is possible if you first define it and then you design it. So what was the first object we picked up? Dictionary. What was the second object? Blueprints, right? The outdated blueprints that are magical. The third thing is that we pick up from the bookshelf is a magical wand. So a little bit more on the magical side, so might as well have said it's at Hogwarts with Harry Potter and gang. So the magical wand, what does the magical wand represent? The magical wand is the object that magicians use to make stuff happen. It's the third D, which is to decide. We have to execute on the plan that we have created. We have to make a firm decision. It's easy to come up with plans, but it's very, very, very hard to stick to them. And that's where it can kind of help to have someone to keep you accountable. You may want to talk to your spouse, say, hey, you know, I want to dedicate more of my time at home, or I want, maybe, you know, I focus mostly on spending time with family, but another big aspect of work-life balance is getting enough sleep. Who here gets enough sleep every night? One? We have a pandemic in Western society of chronic lack of sleep. That's a very, very important part of being at our best at work, right? Can you imagine if I can't talk because last 3 nights baby Theo's been waking me up every night for feeding, but doing my job as a sales trainer is much more challenging when I haven't had enough sleep. When I sit down to do my work, it can take me half an hour to write a blog post, or it can take me 2 hours, depending on how well rested I am. Exercise is another important thing. How many of us exercises enough? I'm not going to put my hand up for this one. So we got one person out of about Gavin as well. Yeah, he's going to the gym, busting out those moves and building up those abs. So once again, chronic lack of sleep and chronic lack of exercise. So we need to design these things into our life if they are important enough to us, and they are important. We need enough sleep, we need to exercise. From a scientific perspective, so my background's in nursing, used to read a lot of scientific literature, medical literature. From a productivity point of view, you are not at your best if you're not exercising. That's just the blunt truth. You're not at your best at work if you're not exercising. There are so many chemical processes that happen in our body and in our brains that are not at their optimal state if we are not getting regular exercise. Define, design, decide. What was the first object we picked up? Dictionary. What was the second object? And the final? The magic wand. First, decide what it is that you want. Design it into your life, move towards it, and make a decision. Talk to your spouse, get some accountability around that. I'd like to wrap up with another story. This one I did not write, so it is not going to be as strange as my strange analogy. It's called The Mexican Fisherman. Now, at the risk of perpetuating the idea that Mexicans are lazy, this Mexican fisherman was going about his own business when an American wealthy businessman approaches him. The businessman asks him the question, oh, those are very impressive fish that you have there, this yellowfin tuna. How long did it take you to fish for those, to get that catch? The Mexican fisherman responds, and I'm not going to do a Mexican accent because I can't. He responds by saying, oh, only a few hours. Oh, well, what do you do with the rest of your time? Oh, well, in the afternoons, I take a siesta, as Mexicans do. And then in the evening, I spend time playing with my kids. I have dinner with my family and my wife. And in the nighttime, I strum my guitar with my friends. Well, Mr. Mexican Fisherman, this American says, if you were to take my guidance, you could expand your business. You could, if you just work a few more hours every day, catch more fish, you'd have more money, which you can then reinvest into the business. When you make this reinvestment, then you can start hiring fishermen, and these fishermen will catch more fish. And once they catch more fish, you'll make more profits, you can expand your venture, not just in Mexico, but you can start exporting your product around the world. You'll make millions, and you can sell the company, and you can retire comfortably. The Mexican responds, what will I do then? Well, then you can have your siesta. You can take those strolls with your wife. You can strum your guitar with your friends and play with your kids. That's the end of the original story. Now, who can tell me what the meaning behind this story is?
I've heard it before, so I can tell you.
Sure.
He says, I'm doing all that now. Why should I go through all this expanding the business just to get my rest and my siesta, what I'm
Yes.
doing by catching just
Yes.
couple of hours a day?
Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right. It's a beautiful message that comes from the story. As a little add-on to that, now that's one side of the story, but my add-on is this. Okay, so the Mexican sits back and thinks to himself, I don't like the greedy attitude of this American businessman, but I do care about my family. I do care about my community, my village. You see, there's a lot of people in my village who are unemployed, who have no skills to earn their own money. If I were to grow my business, I will then be able to teach these villagers how to fish. And when they fish for me, I will be feeding their families by paying them a wage. The fish that I provide the community will be the top quality fish. We're going to give it to them at a fair price. We're going to give the other fish companies a run for their money. As the company expands, we can probably upgrade a few things, buy a nicer hut for my family or house, whatever he's living in. We can upgrade the car that we're living in, and we are going to be benefiting not just my family, but everybody in my vicinity. So then he decides to take up tutelage from this American businessman, who turns out not to be so greedy, but he came across that way in the beginning. The reason that I've added that extra bits to the story is because I feel like there needs to be a balance between the two concepts. On the one hand, it's important to be content with what we have. But on the other side, we need to always be striving for something more. There's something innate in all of us as human beings, especially as men. We have that extra testosterone that makes us want to take action and to constantly pursue new opportunities. There has to be a balance between feeling contented with what we have, being grateful for what we have, but constantly pursuing something better, improving ourselves, upgrading our skills, pursuing after that next goal. I don't know about you, but I've met a couple of people who've worked in the same job for 10, 12 years, and they feel like they're stagnating. And the problem that they're experiencing is a lack of growth. They're not pushing themselves. They've gotten too comfortable. So there has to be a balance between, talking about work-life balance, there has to be a balance between these two forces as well. Before I wrap up, I've left a piece of paper in front of each of you. On this piece of paper is an offer for a complimentary consultation. For those of you who are currently running your own businesses, if you would like to explore ways that you can sell more and increase your revenue the ethical way, that's pretty much what my realm of practice. Feel free to put your details in, and I'll be in contact, and we can have a chat. Apart from that, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to meeting each one of you.